Storytime about how I stole my best friend's boyfriend and she ended up poisoning me. Disclaimer, is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. I met my ex-best friend 10 years ago. We hit it off right away in school and were inseparable. But shortly into our friendship, I noticed how jealous and envious she was. She envied my life and everything that I had. I got lots of attention from boys and she didn't. Every time we would go out, I was the one constantly getting hit on. It actually made me feel so bad for her. I stopped dressing up whenever we would hang out, and I even stopped wearing makeup just to make her feel better. She asked me if I was doing that on purpose and I told her no. I told her I just wanted to feel more natural and that it had nothing to do with her. But this actually started working. That's when she started borrowing my clothes and my makeup. She didn't even know how to use makeup, so I would do it for her. Every single weekend that we would go out, she would look really amazing. I would do her makeup and her hair and dress her up before we went out. Usually I would go in jeans and a t-shirt and not do anything to my hair or my face. But like I said, I only did this when I would go out with her. Whenever I went out with other friends, I would always look my best. But it actually started to work. Instead of me getting hit on at the bars and clubs, she would get hit on. And this made her feel so much better. And it actually made me really happy too. She started going on a few dates, and she had really good guys interested in her. One of the guys was in financing, owned a house, and traveled a lot, and was good looking too. The other one owned his own business, was good looking, really tall, and wanted kids right away. He would basically tell her that he wanted to marry her. But instead of being interested in them, she wanted to date more guys. She became a serial dater. Before I knew it, every single weekend I would go to her house to help her get ready for her dates, which by the way would take me 2 to 3 hours to do her hair, makeup, and outfit. But like I said, I was happy to help her. On one occasion, I told her I couldn't come over to do her makeup and her hair because I had a date of my own. She told me I was ungrateful and hung up the phone on me. I was shocked by her behavior. While I was on my date, she called me 10 times. When I answered, she demanded to know where I was. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I stole my best friend's boyfriend and she ended up poisoning me. Disclaimer, it's not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. After I see her 10 missed calls while I was on my date, I finally call her back. And when I answered, all she asked me was where I was. I told her I was on my date and that I couldn't talk. That's when she told me that she would just bring the makeup to where I was so that I could help her do her makeup for her date. I was so angry that I decided to defend myself. I told her she was being a brat and super ungrateful. Then I told her I was going to hang up on her and not talk to her for the next few days. I decided to turn off my phone for the rest of the night. Finally, a few days later, I decided to call her. That's when she gives me a half-ass apology telling me she shouldn't have done that and that she was acting like a brat. That's when I told her I didn't want to do her makeup and hair every single weekend. She said she would learn how to do her own makeup if I could just teach her. So of course, I agreed. After that, things got way better between us. She actually ended up becoming girlfriend with one of the guys, the one that was the business owner. She insisted that we do a double date. So I ended up having a date come with me to dinner with them. We were having fun up until my best friend started getting really drunk. This is when she just started acting out. She started telling the guys about how much I would get hit on and about all the dates I've been on, about how many sexy time partners I had. I mean, this is girl code. You do not talk about exes or guys that your girlfriend is dating to her boyfriend or date. I was so angry with her. Her boyfriend looked at me, apologized, and said that he would take her home. So my date and I decided to stay at the restaurant and finish our dinner. Then I get a message from my best friend's boyfriend apologizing on her behalf. He asked me if he could call me on the phone and we talked for an hour. Part 2 is up. Part 3 of how I stole my best friend's boyfriend and she ended up poisoning me. Disclaimer, is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. My BF's boyfriend called me. He apologized for my best friend's behavior while she was drunk. I told him that I would talk to her whenever she was sober. Before I knew it, he and I had been on the phone for a full hour. He was making me laugh so much and we were having such a great conversation. We finally got off the phone and I literally had butterflies in my stomach. And I started thinking about him differently. I mean, I knew that he was my best friend's boyfriend, but he was being so nice. And he was successful and funny and good looking. That's when I decided to cut my best friend off. I stopped answering her texts and phone calls. One day she showed up at my house asking me if I could help her get ready for another date. I told her that I didn't want to be her friend anymore and basically slammed the door in her face. She kept calling me to apologize and eventually I accepted. But her boyfriend and I didn't stop texting. I started to realize that I was falling for him, so I decided to tell him that I had feelings and that we shouldn't talk anymore. That's when he told me that he had feelings for me too. All this while I would still hang out with my best friend every single weekend. She would bring me food and make us drinks while she was at my place. I started feeling different symptoms after a few weeks. I would get these really bad headaches and I just felt sick all the time. I decided to go to the doctor and they couldn't find anything. One day her boyfriend calls me and tells me that he really wants to see me. He comes over to my house and we kissed. He told me that he wanted to break up with her to be with me. I couldn't resist and I said yes. When we confronted her, she said that she had seen our messages already. She called me a bunch of names and told me that she had been poisoning me. First I didn't believe her, but then I went and got tested and it was true. I haven't spoken to her since and I don't know if I should tell the cops. Him and I are still together. What should I do?
After 16 years of being poor, I finally became rich. Hi, my name is Lindsay and I submitted this story. Growing up, I always had this strange obsession with money. I always wanted to figure out ways to make money, how to save money. I even wanted to learn investing, but my parents said it was too advanced for me at the time. Kids had always made fun of me saying I was adopted and poor. I had blonde hair and brown eyes. Meanwhile, my parents had brown hair and blue eyes. We didn't really have much funds. My mom and dad were both living paycheck to paycheck and tried their best to support me and them. And my dad was attending college for being a lawyer at the same time, so we had that debt as well. But around my 16th birthday, I got a letter in the mail. It was lettered to me and it said happy birthday. I started reading it and I was in absolute shock. The letter in fact confirmed that I was adopted, and it was my real mother messaging me. She said it was illegal for me to do this, so I kept it a secret. I never asked my parents if I was adopted, so I decided to do it today. I hid the letter under my pillow and went downstairs and asked them, was I adopted? And their faces were insane. Make sure to follow. I'm in love with him, but my Muslim parents don't approve, part 1. When I was around 5 years old, I met this boy, let's call him Henry. Henry was black, and he was in a really big family. Me and him were always at the hip. And we've been friends now for about 11 years. I'm now 15 in high school and he's 16. I've had this undeniable crush on him. All of my friends know, I know, he knows probably, his friends know, and he has a mutual crush on me. So he decided to ask me out, and I agreed. So around this time, prom came around, and I dressed up for prom, and my parents were so excited to see my date. So when they opened the door and he was my date, they looked so disappointed, and they looked mad. It made me and my boyfriend Henry actually pretty insecure, but we ignored it and went to the school dance and continued to enjoy ourselves. When I came home, I got the yell of my life. My mom said, "Fatima, you cannot marry that boy." I asked her why, and you will not believe what she said. It was extremely racist. Come back for part 2. After 16 years of being poor, I finally became rich, part 2. So I asked both parents if I was adopted, and they gave me a disgusting look on my face. My mother said, "Lindsay, stop asking such obnoxious, annoying questions and go back to your room." She was extremely snappy for I don't know what reason. She was never like this. So I decided to dig a little deeper. I actually wrote back to the person who was my so-called birth mother and asked her if she had any social media that I could contact her off of. About 3 days later, she wrote back giving me her phone number. And so I began texting her. I asked for a picture of her and I looked just like her. She had blonde hair and brown eyes just like me. She sent me a picture of my so-called father as well. He had brown eyes and blonde hair as well. I was in shock. I continued texting her, and I wanted to meet up with her one day. But then she mentioned she had a daughter that went to the same school as me. And the only girl I could think of was one of the rich, popular, mean girls of the school. Her name was Regina. So one day I was staring at her in class. She gave me a dirty look and you would not believe what she said. Come back for part 3. After 16 years of being poor, I was finally rich. So one day I was staring at Regina in class and she said, "What are you looking at, loser?" A bunch of her friends behind her laughed. One of the guys had said this, "You guys actually look pretty similar, I'm not gonna lie. You both have the same nose and eyebrow shape, it's kinda creepy." She then said, "Shut up! No we don't! Don't you ever compare me to that loser ever again." And everyone just joked around with him and came after him, like in a joking way. I just gave her a dirty look and looked away. After that, I decided to stalk her Facebook a little bit. People typically post family photos there and stuff. And I looked for what her mom looked like, and I kid you not, she was standing next to my mom. And her mom was my mom as well. But how was I going to break the news to her? How would she take it? Would she be accepting of finally having a sister, or would she sit here and call me crazy? Would it break off the communication me and my so-called birth mother have? I wasn't sure, but I decided to take a risk anyways. I went up to Regina and asked her if we could talk in private. But she said I could say whatever I needed to say in front of her friends. Come back for part. After 16 years of being poor, I was finally rich, part 5. I explained to Regina that I'm her sister in front of her friends, and she laughed. She said, "There's no way a loser like you could be my sister. You're insane. Get away from me." And they all just laughed and I walked away. So for the next week, I continued texting our mother, and she actually invited me over for dinner. She gave me the house address, and I went to her house, and she had a huge mansion. It was insane. She showed me a car and a college tuition fund, and she had all of that waiting for me for when I was older. And she said I could live with her. I went inside and saw Regina's face, and she was shocked. Now I live there. Regina eventually warmed up to me, but everything is fine now. I'm now enjoying being rich. Follow for more story time.
Am I the asshole for complimenting a cashier? My sister thinks I'm the asshole, but I'm confused on how I could be. I was buying a bagel on Thursday and noticed the cashier was rather pretty. She had tattoos, so she was probably at least 18, and she looked around 19 or 20. I completed my order and said, "You know you're gorgeous, right?" To my shock, she gave me a blank stare and looked kind of disgusted. I tried to make conversation with her as I own both and asked her if she's ever been on one. She said, "You're done with your order, right? I think we're done here." She didn't even say thank you and gave me a nasty look. I don't think my compliment was crude or nasty, and her reaction was shocking. My sister said it was weird to give that kind of compliment considering I'm 58, but I wasn't flirting with her.
So when I was a sophomore in high school, I had this teacher who would only let the students in her class use the restroom one time per semester. Well, one day I raised my hand and I was like, excuse me, I don't remember her name. Can I please use the restroom? And she was like, no, you can't because you've already used the restroom in my class this semester. Well, excuse me, you can't dictate my bladder. So I'm like all frustrated and I started secretly texting my mom because I wasn't allowed to use my phone in class. And I was like, Mom, I'm sitting in class right now. My teacher won't let me use the restroom. And she was like, I'll take care of it for you. And I was like, okay. So like 5 minutes goes by and all of a sudden my teacher's phone starts ringing and she walks up to it and answers it and she's like, hello? Yeah. Okay, thank you. And then she walks up to me like so angry and she like slams the pass on my desk and she was like, since you have to go that bad. And I was like, yeah, I really do, thanks. And I got up and left. I didn't even have to go to the bathroom. It was just the principle of it. I just roamed the halls. My daughter Savannah is the CEO of faking illness to get out of school. So when she does not feel like being there, she will go to the nurse's office and complain to them that she is really not feeling good so that they call me and I have to go get her. Well, one day after this happens, I walk into the administrative office and everybody is really concerned because Savannah is sitting in a chair like so dramatically like, hi, Mom. And like when I saw her, I burst out laughing. I was like, oh my God, are you okay? And everybody looked at me like I was some really bad mom. Like, oh my God, why aren't you more concerned? But as we were walking out, she was walking really slow and actually didn't look good. So even I was a little concerned. I was like, oh my God, honey, are you okay? Until we got to the car when Savannah looks at me and goes, you know what, Mom? I feel better now. And I was like, Savannah, are you serious? And she's like, Mom, do you maybe want to go to Starbucks and have like a girls' day? And I was like, honey, what kind of question is that? You know I do.
This is why you should always lock your doors. A class was playing a game of Kahoot when they heard a voice on the intercom say, "This is not a drill, go into lockdown." The students huddled in the back of the classroom and then the power went off. Minutes later, the students heard the sound of a man screaming at the top of his lungs, running down the hallway. The lunatic man started banging on the lockers and his screams gradually got louder. He then started banging on the classroom window, yelling, "Open up." He eventually left, and 10 minutes later, a voice on the intercom said a mentally ill person had entered the school and attacked the lady at the front desk. The staff did a sweep of the school and still couldn't find him, so they locked the doors and resumed class. Later that night, one of the janitors went into the utility closet when this happened.
This is why you should never explore abandoned ships. In 2014, the US Navy decided to decommission one of its oldest ships, so it brought it into port to be broken down for scrap. Before workers were allowed to actually start breaking it down, the foreman had to go on board and take pictures of every room. So late one night, the foreman spends about an hour walking through this abandoned ship with a flashlight, taking about 100 pictures. When he was done, he emailed the pictures to his boss, who quickly wrote back, "Who's the guy with the axe?" The foreman had no idea what he was talking about, but he noticed the boss had attached one of the pictures that he had just sent him. When he opened it, he nearly fainted. There, in the bowels of the ship, poking his head around a corner, was a faceless man wielding an axe. The foreman had spent over an hour in this hallway and never heard or saw this guy. The Navy searched the ship and never found this guy. They also reviewed security footage of the only entrance, and he never entered or left the ship. This is why you should always trust your parents. In 1990, a father and his 15-year-old son worked together at a gas station in Florida. One night, the boy was sitting outside on a break when he saw a crazy-looking woman walking towards the store. They were in a high-crime area and it was very late, so the boy turns around to look through the glass at his dad to see what he should do. His dad took one look at the woman and just shook his head, "No, do not help her." The woman walks up to the boy and says, "Hey, my car's broken down, can you give me a ride?" Before the boy can answer, his dad bursts outside and says, "You need to leave here immediately." Angrily, the woman turns and leaves, cussing them both out the whole way. 1 year later, the boy's in his room at home when his dad calls from the other room and says, "You gotta come in here and look at the TV." On the screen was the same woman from the gas station. Better known as Eileen Warnos, she was a serial killer who used to pick up her male victims at gas stations in Florida. She was later put to death. If someone offers you this, walk away. In 2016, a man was staying at his friend's cabin in the woods when he decided to go for an evening stroll. A little ways down the trail, he hears someone call out from behind his neighbor's house. He looks up and he sees this skinny guy pop out from behind the building who starts waving frantically at him to come over. Worried this guy could be in trouble, the man takes off running to assist, but when he gets close enough, the neighbor just offers him a fistful of Slim Jims and starts talking about how much he hates his wife. Sensing there was something wrong with this guy, he says no thank you to the Slim Jims and walks away. The next day, the man calls his friend who owned the cabin to ask him what the deal was with his weirdo neighbor. There was silence on the phone, and then his friend just says, "I don't have any neighbors." The police are called, and it turns out his neighbor was really some lunatic who had recently killed his wife and had been hiding out in the abandoned cabin next door. If you make it to the end, I'm sorry. In 2007, a woman was lying awake in her hotel bed when she started hearing a kid run up and down the hall laughing and making tons of noise. She considered going out and telling the kid to be quiet, but eventually just said whatever and fell asleep. The next morning she got up and asked her teenage daughter who was staying in the room next door if she had heard the kid, and she said yes, it was so annoying. That night the woman is back in bed trying to sleep when once again she hears the kid in the hall. Now feeling pretty annoyed herself, she starts walking to the front door to get a better listen when the footsteps stop right in front of her door and she hears the kid playing with the do not disturb sign. She leans into the peephole to get a better look, but the kid's gone. So she steps into the hallway and looks down the hall, and there's the kid at the far end, just standing there perfectly still.
Storytime, I got my boyfriend back for cheating on me by getting him arrested. It was the summer before my sophomore year in high school.